Hello everyone and welcome to the first tutorial of 2020. First, I'm gonna be wishing you happy holidays to everyone. And second, this video will be huge. I'm gonna be focusing on materials, lights, camera angles, light mix, switching from day scene to night scene, post-production of course, and let's get started. So, as a start, we're gonna grab a box, simple box, and with a height of 280, we're gonna length of 650, let's say, and a width of 60. Alright, now to the move tool, or you can press W on your keyboard, we're gonna right click on X, Y to align it to the center. Alright, now we're gonna add a editable poly, and we're gonna delete the top. Alright, okay, so to my downloads, and of course I'll be leaving all the links for you to download all the materials and all the models that I'll be using in this video. Okay, I'm gonna grab the free bed here. Make sure angle snap tool is on. You can press A on your keyboard, E for rotate, and we're gonna rotate this for 90 degrees. Alright, and of course group it to bed. Now to our camera here, we're gonna select Corona camera and align it. Press Shift F on our keyboard to enable save frames, so I can see the frames that I'll be setting for the camera. Make sure Corona renderer is set, and go to common, and let's have some space in our image. Alright, we can see here that our camera is very close to the bed, and we don't want that. We need more space for our interior so we can show our full space. So we're gonna go back to our camera, select our camera here. Okay, go to the modify list, scroll down to environment and clipping. We're gonna enable camera clipping. Okay, so here we can go back. You can see that the camera is outside the wall now. Alright, and we're gonna enable camera clipping, and here's default shading so you can see more, and we're gonna cut through the wall. So let me set an amount of 220, let's say, and here we go. You can see now we have more breathing room inside our scene, and that will be much better. Alright, so let's start modeling this scene. Shift F to disable the save frames. Alright, I'm gonna be grabbing this edge here. I'm gonna take it up there. Alright, I'll be needing a wall behind my bed, so I'm gonna grab a box, simple box. Okay, and we're gonna edit poly this box, and we're gonna align it somehow here. Okay, the trick is you go to snap tool, right click on it, go to options, and make sure enable axis constraints is on. This will allow us to snap on objects easily. Okay, so we're gonna select the vertices here and align it to the top, and those vertices here, I'm gonna align it to the edge here. Alright, now we can see that it's perfectly aligned, and we're gonna make this a little smaller, something like this. Alright. Now we're gonna need some openings here, and before we do that, we're gonna detach the floor. Let's name it floor. Select it, and let's shell this floor to something like 20. Alright. Assign a different color for it. And different color for the wall. Alright. Now we need some openings here. So I'm gonna grab those edges here, connect them. Let's say we need 3 of this. And this one would be a little smaller here, and leave some space for the wall. Alright, so I'm gonna grab the first one, second one, and third one. And I make sure I inset by group, so I have to hit this button here. And let's inset to something like 3.75, let's say, and hit OK. Now we're gonna extrude them to something like 10. And of course, delete them. Alright. Now we have some openings and the basic model so far. Okay. We're gonna copy this to make the roof. So we hold Shift and drag it to up. Make sure it's a copy and align it. Now I need an opening here for the curtains, so I'm gonna grab an edit poly. It's not necessary, but sometimes I like to have more control of it. Alright, a box above the openings here. Make sure the box is way above, but it doesn't touch this or go beside it. So it's gonna be something like this. You can see it from the interior here. Alright, now we go to compound objects, select Boolean and subtract, so we can remove this box here and select it. Alright, now from the front view you can see now that we have an opening in our roof. Let me isolate this so you can see it clearly. Alright, this is our window openings here, so they can fit inside. Unhide all and back to our camera angle. Alright, and let's delete the box, of course, and make sure we save. Alright, now I'm gonna select cylinder here, and let's make a cylinder. Alright, and move it to here and copy another one as instance to here. Alright, maybe a little further, something like this. Alright, and of course make sure they align to the wall, so we're gonna edit poly, select the vertices, press S to snap, and align them to the wall here. Alright, now we have our basic model, but we're missing the windows. So we're gonna hide the roof, hide those two, go to Windows, select Fixed, make sure Snap is on, and we're gonna create the windows here. And here we have our 3 openings. Alright. Now I'm gonna select those windows here and go to my material editor to assign the material for it. So we're gonna grab a multi-subject object or multi-sub object. We're gonna set the number to 5 and go to our material library here from Corona. Go to the glass, assign a thin glass material to number 3, and go to, where is it, plastic, and assign a PVC white matte to number 1, 2, 4, and 5, and assign this material to our window. And of course UVW this to box real world scale. Alright, now before we start the interactive and set up our light in our scene, we need to exclude the windows from the material override. So to our render setup, we press F10, go to scene, select material override, and select a basic Corona material, and hit the plus button here to exclude our windows so light can go inside our scene. Alright, and we're gonna unhide all and go to our camera angle. Make sure you save and hit start interactive render. You can see here that our scene is full black because we don't have any light sources in our scene. So back to our render setup, we're gonna go to scene and environment and hit single map, and you can see simple lights coming inside our room. Alright, now before we do this, let's make sure we cover our windows with the curtains needed so we can work on the correct lighting in our scene. So I'm gonna select the curtains, okay, curtains, send downloads. Alright, so this model is from CGMood and I'll be leaving the link of course for you to download. And we're gonna merge it in our scene and delete the ones that I don't need, so we won't be needing those. I'm gonna be needing this one only, but I'm gonna change the materials from the Corona material library to a curtain material, so we're gonna select this one here and make sure of course to UVW this as real world scale. Now move the curtains to here, okay, and in front view make sure they're perfectly aligned. First let's align them to the floor so they won't be flying. Set position to minimum and maximum. Okay, unhide all and make sure you FFT this to 2x2. Select the control points and move them down the opening correctly. Alright, now we can copy this as much as you want. As a copy, let's say. Alright. Here we have our curtains and our scene. Okay. Here we go. And of course, let's exclude those 3 actually. again from the material override and hit unhide all and fire up again the Corona Interactive. We can see here that our light is very dim because we don't have any lighting source but our single map here from Corona without even Corona Sky. For this scene we're gonna be using a HDRI that I downloaded, and we're gonna go to Corona bitmap, select the HDRI that I've downloaded. Here it is. We're gonna open it and make sure the environment mode is set to spherical. And I'm gonna grab also a Corona color correction and assign the HDRI to it to have more control to our HDRI and lights. We're gonna go here and assign it in our environment tab as instance. Okay, now we can see that our scene is more dim, and here we're gonna start with our changes. So go to Corona color correction, and here you can see HDR adjustments, and we're gonna give it more exposure, so maybe set this to something like 5, let's say. Alright, let's switch 7. Okay, this light seems pretty good, but we can see that we have a light here that is burned or light burn. We can go here to our highlight compress and set this to something like 5 or 10. Much better. But we can see here that we have some yellowish tint to our image, and we need to get rid of that. So to our saturation here, we can set an amount of something like -0.8, let's say. And here it is. That's a much better lighting. And of course we can set the exposure higher to something like 0.5 or 1 to make the image inside a lot more brighter. I'm not gonna touch anything here from the settings now. I'm gonna leave this to later. We're gonna be focusing more on adding more light sources to our scene. So close the material editor and maybe add the sun to our scene. So to see clearly, we're gonna maximize our viewport here, hit the plus button, select configure viewports, go to layout and select the style here and make sure both of them are Corona camera 1. Hit apply and OK. In our render setup tab, we're gonna select this viewport here. You can see this brown safe frame up above, and we're gonna lock it. Inside here we hit Corona camera, extended viewport, and we're gonna start Corona Interactive and click to start it. Okay, now I'll be having more control inside or outside, where I can position my sun to the liking that I want. So Corona sun, click and drag, and we're gonna find the nice position to our scene. Okay, maybe give the curtains a little bit of space so light can shine through inside. Select the other curtain here. Alright, now we can see that light is coming inside our scene, but it's too bright and shiny and we don't need that. So we're gonna select our Corona sun, decrease the intensity to something like 0.08, let's say, and increase the size of it to something like 24 so we don't get those sharp shadows. Alright, and of course we're gonna disable generate caustics and maybe decrease the intensity a little bit more to something like 0.04, let's say. Alright, but fix this curtain here because I don't want this much light inside from the sun. Okay, so it's gonna be something like this. Alright, increase the highlight compress to actually decrease the exposure to something like 0.8 and make sure the sun here is set to direct input so I don't get this yellowish tint, and it's all about preference depending on your scene. Alright, now we're gonna start with the wall material here, but before we do that we're gonna add some realism to it. So let's grab our box here and attach it to our wall and attach all of this to our ceiling. Now you can see we have this as one object. So we're gonna disable the Corona Interactive here and we're gonna make sure to save before going to the next phase. So back to our material editor, we're gonna grab a Corona material and a Corona bitmap and select our texture, assign it to our diffuse and preview it so you can see it clearly. Basically it's a simple polished concrete, but we can see that it's super flat and we don't have any bumps or imperfections to it, and we don't need that. So let's minimize our 3D Max and select our texture and add it to Photoshop. Alright, now in Photoshop we're gonna create a normal map so we can have like dents and bumps into our material so it will look more realistic. So in Photoshop we select filter, go to 3D here and assign generate normal map. Okay, now here in our map you can see that if we increase the detail scale our map will look more realistic and it has some like bumps and dents to it, but this is too much for simple concrete, so we're gonna decrease this to an amount of, let's say, 10 and hit OK. Go to File, Save As, and call it Smooth Concrete Normal and hit Save to the maximum quality, of course, and hit OK. Now we can close Photoshop, go back to our material editor, from Corona select Corona Normal, Corona bitmap, select the bitmap that we just made and assign it to our normal map and select it and assign it to our bump. Now here you can see that our material has turned into something very weird, and that's because our normal is not set to be used with Corona with an incorrect gamma value. So the value here we're gonna change it to match Coronas, so we're gonna add it to gamma to input, and we can see here that the texture is back to normal. Now coming back to the material here, we're gonna assign a bump of something like 1.2 and select it here. We can see that it's, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the texture definitely has changed a lot. Alright, now we're gonna be needing a reflection glossiness map so we can control the glossiness of the texture. Back to our material, we're gonna select the reflection level to be 1, and we're gonna add the color correction to here, and shift drag to copy the texture, assign it to our color correction map, and assign the color correction map to our reflection glossiness so we can control the glossiness of the texture and the reflection. Alright, in color correction we're gonna make this to monochrome, decrease the saturation to something like -25, and decrease the contrast to something like -15. So now 3D Max can read the reflection and the glossiness of this texture. Okay, now we're gonna grab an output map so we can control the glossiness and reflection of it. To output map, we're gonna select output here and tick enable color map. Right click here, select Bezier corner and bump this up, and we can see the reflection, the true reflection of this map changing here. So if we take this higher up, you can see that it's more reflective and has a lot of glossiness. Let's assign it to something minimal, because this is a simple concrete that is polished. Okay, so I think this would do. And we're gonna assign this material to our wall. But before we do that, we're gonna chamfer this wall so we can have more realism to it. I'm gonna zoom in here, press F4 to see the edges. I'm gonna increase the segments to a number 3. Make sure that its smoothing is going for the unsmooth edges, and we're gonna chamfer smooth the chamfers only. Okay. Now back to my camera here. I'm gonna assign the material I just made. I'm gonna call this wall material. Okay, and we're gonna assign it and make sure it's shaded in our viewports. Go to the top, assign a UVW map as a box, and make sure it's perfectly assigned everywhere. Okay, now back to my render setup, we're gonna disable this from the material override and check it in our interactive. If you see this white image here, you gotta disable the lock from the render setup. Okay, the texture seems pretty fine and it's looking pretty good. And maybe decrease the chamfer here to an amount of 0.5 and segments of 2. Okay, much better. Now let's go to contrast and increase the contrast to something like 3 and select a LUT for an image. And increase the LUT to something like 0.2 or 0.3. Alright, we can see that our image has turned into a yellowish tint again. That's because our material here is a bit yellowish, So we can select again a corona color correction and assign it to our diffuse map and decrease the saturation to something like -0.5. Much better. Alright. Sorry about that. Now for the floor material, we're gonna alt Q here so we can see better. I'm gonna grab a ready material from CGMood that you can download. So textures here. I'm gonna merge this into my file. Relink the textures using the relink bitmap script that you can also download from my description. Okay, we have my textures relinked here, as you can see. So our material editor, we're gonna select the picker here and pick the material from the object and assign it to my floor and assign a UVW map. Okay. And unhide all. Exclude it from our object from the material override and check it again into our interactive rendering. And so far it's looking pretty great. Alright, now let me increase the sharpness a little bit so I can see clearly, and maybe add a bit of corrections to the scene here. So maybe increase the filmic shadows to something like 0.5, add the vignette to something like 0.6. Okay, much better. Let me check that light leak from here. And fix the light leak. Always check for light leaks. Alright. Now, I'm gonna be adding the other models to my scene. I'm gonna be adding one model. Okay, so it's gonna be the plants. Before doing this, make sure to always save. Okay, we're gonna merge this into our file. Alright, here we have our models merged, and that's a heavy one, of course. I'm gonna take it here. I'm gonna pick the models that I'll be needing in my scene. So, select it, group, open, and select the models that I want. Take them away, detach, and group them. Of course, I'll be needing those two here too. Group, detach, group again. I'm gonna be needing this table here. Again, group, detach, and group it. Right, and I'm gonna delete the other unnecessary objects. Okay, so hide selection, this goes here. We're gonna scale it by pressing R on our keyboard, something like this, and we're gonna align it to our floor. Make sure the pivot is on the center. And I'm gonna align it. Minimum, maximum to the Z. For my table, it's gonna go somewhere here. And for those, they're gonna be behind the bed. So unhide all. I'm gonna scale those two here and make sure they're aligned to my wall. The table is gonna be somewhere like this. Move the bed a little bit. And for those two cylinders, we're gonna assign the same material that were on the wall. Alright, now I'm gonna grab the other models. I'm gonna merge them again in my scene. Okay, I'm gonna grab, assign them here, scale a bit. And grab the others too. And scale them down. And here we have it. One more here, rotate it. And here we go. And of course, assign all the missing textures. Alright. One more thing here. I'm gonna be needing a desk. So I'm gonna be drawing a little box. Okay. And select an editable poly, of course. Select the vertices, snap on, align it. Here we go, something like this. Alright. Grab that box. And of course, add a chamfer to it. To an amount of 0.5 segments of 2. Unsmooth edges, smooth chamfers only. And if I zoom in here, we can see that we have a nice smooth edges that will be looking realistic on our render. The reason I do this is because in real life there is no 90 degrees or a perfectly done angle. Even a small paper has some imperfections to it, to the edges. So here we go, maybe a smaller amount of 0.2. Alright, now I'm gonna assign a material for this. So Corona material, Corona bitmap, and select our bitmap here, assign it to our bump, and give it a bit of reflection with lower glossiness, of course, and assign it show shaded again, UVW as box, and have it sit perfectly here. Okay, so as you can see guys, the process is really easy. All you have to do is learn the basics and you can go on and start making your own scenes that will be looking realistic. Okay, now to our final model here, we're gonna be adding our chair, also downloaded from CGMood. Here it is. Alright, to my camera angle, I'm gonna rotate this to something like that. Bring this lower. And here we have it. Alright. Now let's fire up again our interactive so we can see the objects in our scene. Alright. Now I forgot something. We have our light here next to our bed. So this will be the final object. I'm gonna select this one here. Okay, and move it next to my bed. And make sure it's aligned to the floor. Okay. I suppose that all bitmaps are here. Now we're gonna convert everything. We'll make sure there's no V-Ray materials in our scene. Save this again. Okay, and make sure that we convert all bitmaps to Corona bitmaps. Alright, now let's disable material override and hit interactive so we can see the scene. Alright, it's looking pretty great. And now I'm gonna be adding a few touches here and there so we can make it look perfectly perfect. Alright, now you can see that the edges here are a little bit weird and I need them to not only have some chamfer to it to look more realistic, but maybe add some black tint to it. So let me go back to my material and I'm gonna grab a Corona AO here I'm gonna select this to Uncluded Color and assign it to my diffuse. You can see that we have a small black tint here, and I'm gonna show you this in interactive real quick. So here's my interactive, and you can see now that we have black edges all over the scene, but we don't need it to this extent. So all I have to do is decrease the max distance to something like 0.2 and make sure the occluded color is a little way less, something like this, let's say. Maybe more. Alright, now the shadows looks a lot better in the corners. And I'm gonna hit OK. Back to my bed here. I need to change some materials. So I'm gonna grab this, go to our ready material library from Corona, and it's just that easy. So I'm gonna assign fabric cotton to the cover. From the other cover, I'm gonna set the other fabric cotton lampshade. I'm gonna go to material editor and make this a little bit different from the other. So grab Corona color correction again and desaturate it a bit to something like 0.7. Alright, and hit interactive again to see where we at now. Much better. Okay, now we've come to our final process of the image before post-production. So I'm gonna close this, set up Corona Interactive Mix, and we're gonna select Generate. This will help us create our night mode. So if I go to Interactive, you can see that Light Mix has been activated here, and I can control every light in my scene. This will help us create night mode without the purpose of changing any light in our scene. So let's render this to final before moving to creating the night mode and of course post-production. So in our settings tab, I'm gonna go to common, lock this here to the selected output, and increase the render resolution. I'm gonna be rendering this at a higher resolution, but you can of course change the resolution to the desired resolution that you want depending on your PC specs. So we'll be rendering this and I'll be back with post-production, light mix of course, to our night scene. Alright, now that the rendering's done, we can see that the image is a little bit too exposed and some lights that we need to turn off in order to create a daytime image. So starting with light mix, we can disable the light here. Alright, and we need to set the correct colors for our environment, which is kind of blue, something around 7,000, let's say, and the sun will cast of course a warmer color. Let's take it up to something like this, 4,500. Okay, you can see we have a warmer tone here and the scene is looking like it's daytime. We can also adjust the curve level here So we're gonna press one here and press one up. Gonna take this a little bit down. We can see that the image is getting a little bit darker, and increase the light by taking the curve up a little bit, something like this. Let's try with the exposure going to 0.7, and maybe I'll leave this light here but a little bit dimmed, something like 0.5, let's say, and give it a warm color too. Alright, we can also set the sharpening to 2 and enable back the blur, maybe a little less. Denoise, I usually leave it to something like 0.7, 0.6. Bringing this up too much will help us, well, actually not help us, we'll lose a lot of details, and bringing it down to something to 0.6, 0.7 will give us a correct result of the image without losing any details, and not to sharpen it a lot. We can add bloom to our image. You can see the bloom here coming out of the window, and a bit to the light here. Let's maybe increase the filmic shadows to something like 0.7, and give the vignette an increase. Let's leave this to 0.7 too, and here we go. Now we're gonna save this as daytime, so I usually save it as OpenEXR. It will help us like conserve all the image quality, so all the quality will look the same when editing in Photoshop without losing any details. So we're gonna call this daytime. When you save it, make sure it's full float and hit OK. Now for the nighttime, back to light mix. Environment, we're gonna give it a dark blue. To something like this. Alright. Let's wait for autosave and then hit OK. Increase the intensity to something like 1.5, let's say. And disable the sun, of course, and let's increase the intensity of the interior light here to something like 2.2, let's say, and remove the glare, or just decrease the intensity to something like 0.02. Alright, now let's crank the exposure a little bit. And maybe increase the LUT to something like 0.6. Lower the vignette a bit to something like 0.4 so it doesn't look too dark. Let's try and find better lighting. So yeah, 1.8 seems to be good here, and 1.8 for the environment. Let's try and disable the curve. Okay, seems better with the curve. Maybe decrease the contrast to something like 2.8 or 2.7. And here we go. We have our nighttime scene. Make sure it's OpenEXR and hit save. Okay. Now we're gonna minimize this, drag daytime to Photoshop, and open it. Alright. Now we're gonna go to Image, Mode, select 16-bit, make sure exposure and gamma is on, and hit OK. We're gonna go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and play with the settings here. At first I'm gonna try Auto, and White Balance as Auto. Okay. Usually I hit Auto so it will help me see the image clearer and then fix it with the settings here. So I don't need much vibrance, so this we're gonna go to 0, and saturation will go to 0.2. Clarity will go to something like 10, and dehaze will go to an amount of also 10. For the whites, it's gonna be something around 11. Black, make sure it doesn't go full black and doesn't go full white, so it's something right here, something like -12. As for the shadows, we can go to an amount of +1. Let's not delete all the highlights, and we can keep it here. Give back the contrast to the image, and lower down the exposure because it's too exposed to a minimal amount of 0. We can go to the tone curve here and increase the light a bit, give it a more darken, increase the shadow a bit, sharpening an amount of 2, and effects I'm gonna add a little bit of grain and a little bit of vignette. Here we go. We have the image ready and it's looking perfect. Maybe give it a little warm tone and hit OK. You can now save the image as PNG or as JPEG. Now we're gonna drag nighttime and the same process, image, mode, 16-bit, exposure and gamma, and hit OK. I'm gonna go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, select Auto, and play with the settings again. So this is 0 and 0, a little bit of dehaze, a little bit of clarity, darker black, darker shadows of course. Take the light high and remove a bit of darkness. Sharpening goes to 2 or 3. More vignette and more grain. And we hit OK. We're gonna save as JPEG for nighttime. So here you go, guys. This is the final render that you can achieve by following the tutorial. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you can receive all future videos.